Okay, so this one will be interesting, if not controversial. The nature of eternal life. So eternal life is an interesting one where we live in a reality within which life is eternal. It'll just continue on and on and on in perpetuity. So, lots of people talk about, especially, in old times, monarchs and things were always on a quest to find some solution to eternal life, or searching for the Holy Grail so that they could become immortal or live forever. And, these days we look at something like that and we think it's just foolish. Eternal life is impossible. Nonetheless, it already exists. Because this life is perpetual, it's eternal. And I know we're in a state at the moment where it seems like resources are finite, but in truth, when all the individual assets contained by this universe are in a state of wealth creation, then there is a surplus that is enabling all of the future progress to take place for this universe. All of the expansion comes from the wealth generated by each individual component within that system. And of course, most of us are resistant. Most of us aren't in a state of wealth generation yet, although many people do understand wealth and understand how to appreciate an asset. They also, an essential component to that, of course, is understanding that an asset that's depreciating is in the process of being refused into some other form of matter or reconstituted to fit some other purpose. And this is the essential nature of eternal life, is that nothing's wasted. Everything is utilized and appreciated, and everything that isn't utilized and appreciated depreciates until it decomposes and is eventually refused into some other form of matter within the earth. And so eternal life, what does it mean? Well, it's a paradox, because you as a human being, you don't have eternal life, or you don't seem to have eternal life. You're born, then you die. But then if you zoom out to the macro level and you look at the earth, for example, only a fool would think that the earth is not alive. The fact that it can give life, to think that it is not alive itself in some form of being, is pretty foolish. So the earth as a being, as a form of life, is it eternal? It certainly seems that way. It certainly seems that way, because if we've seen this in history in the past, where there have been mass extinction events. And so if human beings became a threat to the earth, I'm certain that there will be an extinction event, or at least some form of naturally occurring event that will bring harmony. And so you could say that even the earth is eternal. But then if you zoom out of that and look at the solar system, is that eternal? It certainly seems like it is. And then if you look at the universe, if you zoom out and look at the universe, it for sure is perpetually expanding. And so what's funding the expansion? If it's business, we look at, if you're starting a business, you look at the different phases you go through of creating something new out of thin air. You've got the early seed stage, you've got pre-revenue, then you've got launch, and then you've got the growth stage, and you need sources of funding at all those stages. There needs to be a surplus from elsewhere, so the wealth of someone else is required in order to give something else new life. And so the universe is continually expanding and it's growing. So where is that surplus energy coming from? Where is the wealth that it needs in order to become more? So it's not only self-sustaining, it's wealth generating, because that expansion is happening out of a surplus generated elsewhere. So eternal life already exists. There's already a mechanism that's perpetual, self-regulating, and eternal. And so it's a paradox, isn't it? Eternal life. Because in order for the universe to be eternal, perpetually growing and expanding and becoming more, there has to be assets contained within it that begin and end. And so eternal life really can be explained as a perpetual state of living and dying. So it's a paradox that in order for it to be eternal, everything that's not appreciating or generating wealth has to be reconstituted. That's the essential nature of eternal life, that if there is something that's not generating wealth, then it is actually depleting the overall wealth of the system as a whole. And we see this, in nature. It's extremely obvious. If you look at a fruit tree, for example, it bears fruit, and when that fruit is ripe, it drops to the earth, and the moment that it is disconnected from its source and that it's not being appreciated by its creator, the tree, the moment it disconnects, the moment it's severed, it's no longer being appreciated by its source, the tree. It is already beginning to decompose and decay into some other form of life, some other form of matter. It'll decay, decompose into the earth, and it'll go as far into the earth as it needs to go until the bonds of its atoms are attacked, and it becomes the building blocks of all life again: hydrogen, carbon, etc., and can then form new bonds, be reconstituted into something else. And so if you look at when a human being, let's say a human being, walks up to the tree and sees the ripe fruit, they can see that the fruit's ready to just fall off on its own. They then pick the fruit, they disconnect it from its source, so it's no longer appreciating, and then the human being eats the fruit. Now, what's happening with that fruit? It's being reconstituted. So in the same way that fruit, if it became ripe and fell off the tree naturally and began decaying into the earth, it's already beginning the process of being reconstituted. That's exactly the same with human beings. You eat the fruit, it's taken into your body, and your body is reconstituting it into other forms of molecules. And the surplus is excreted and eventually goes back into the earth where it can be utilized. And we know that dung is the best form of fertilizer that there is. It's not a coincidence. And this is how all of nature works, that the surplus is utilized to spawn another form of life, another creation. The universe is expanding out of a surplus elsewhere. The surplus of what you take into in your body and that your body needs, you excrete it and it goes back into the earth and is utilized to create life. Everything in this universe is capable of wealth generation. And the only reason something doesn't continue, like let's look at a human being, the only reason a human being doesn't perpetually generate wealth is because they are no longer appreciating. So if you look at yourself as a human being, when you're young, you're totally focused on moving forward, making progress, creating new things, creating value, working in a job. And at some point, most human beings, they allow stagnation to come into their life, staleness. And whatever that staleness is, that stagnation is, it means you're depreciating. It means you're decaying. Because this is a perpetual system, it needs to perpetually create wealth and make progress. And so if you're not making progress, then you're not appreciating. And if you're not appreciating, you are in the process of depreciating, meaning that your life is depreciating. And that's the beginning of the journey towards death. You see? When you're born and you're young, you're moving towards life. You're appreciating life, creating new things, moving forward. And I firmly believe that the longevity of a human being is intrinsically linked to when they begin thinking about dying, thinking about the exit, or whether they, how soon that happens. And it's totally fine, it's totally okay. But life is one of those things where you're born and you live as though you're going to live forever. When you're young, you feel like you're going to live forever, and you just live in the moment. Most of us do, wanting to live moment to moment and just enjoy. And as we get older, we realize, this is going to end one day. We experience loss, we experience the death of someone else, and we begin to fear death. And we start to look at our lives in a way where, we start to think about the ending at some point. And the key is, to create that ending with grace. We want that ending to be graceful rather than abrupt. But this is the essential component of all life. Everything in this reality, the human beings, the trees, every animal, it appreciates and it depreciates. It radiates and decays. And so that's the truth of eternal life, is that there's a beginning and an ending for everything. There has to be, because everything is in this reality is radiant and magnetic. It radiates out and then decays inward. And this is the paradox, that eternal life is enabled through death. It's enabled through death, because the process of decay and depreciation is reconstituting everything that is no longer appreciating, and this mechanism is what creates a surplus. So it has to be efficient, it has to be wealth generating for as long as possible, and every component that is no longer capable of generating wealth or appreciating themselves or their assets that they're the custodians of, then the decay process begins, the depreciation process, and the reconstitution is already happening. The weakening of bonds, the attacking of bonds, and the seeking of more stable bonds continually. So that's really what I wanted to get across, is that eternal life, it exists. It's real. It's already happening right now, but it is dependent upon life and death. So the system itself can be eternal, but the individual components within it, they live and they die. They're born, they live, and then they decay. And when they decay, they're reconstituted into some other form of matter. So I just want to end this with saying that the death is actually an illusion. So yes, there is a beginning and an ending, but that ending is actually an illusion, because it's all a transition. It's all just a state of reconstitution, because if you look at the apple that's on the apple tree, it becomes so ripe that it falls to the ground naturally. It hits the ground and it's already beginning to decay and decompose. And as it's being broken down, and as it falls deeper and deeper into the earth, the bonds holding its atoms together are continually weakening and weakening and weakening, until it becomes the original building blocks of all forms of matter. Hydrogen, carbon, oxygen. And so you see, that apple, it always was made up of those atoms. It was always made up of hydrogen and carbon and oxygen. And, God knows what else. So everything that it was when it was alive, it still is when it goes into the earth. And when it becomes its base elements again, it's like, a brick wall. I've used this quite a lot. A brick wall is a wall. It's one wall, but it is also just a whole lot of bricks. And so if you pull the wall down, the brick wall down, and it just becomes a pile of bricks, you can reconstitute it into something else, into a barbecue area, the surrounds of a pool and a chimney. But it's still just bricks. It's still just a pile of bricks. So this is the grand illusion of eternal life, is that you can perpetually pull down the brick wall, use the bricks to create a chimney and a pizza oven. Then you can pull down the pizza oven and the chimney and use the bricks to make some stairs. Then you can pull down the stairs and use the bricks to make, a garage. This is what eternal life is. There's always going to be an abundance of bricks to make new walls, as long as there are suns burning. Because every atom came from the center of a sun. A Big Bang event where the pressure within a sun becomes so great that it implodes and then explodes particles throughout space and time. There's always going to be abundance of building blocks for as long as there are suns. As long as there are suns being born, then new realities are forming and new building blocks are becoming available. So this is the nature of eternal life. Yes, you die, but in truth, your body is being reconstituted into something that can and will appreciate. And if you're like me, you're really into meditation and going inward and all this kind of stuff, you come to realize that who you really are, is someone observing life through an avatar. Your body isn't who and what you are. It's your self-imposed constraint. And if you listen to another episode I did about the oak tree, how its DNA is a deliberate constraint. It's constraining it to becoming an oak tree. It's destined to become an oak tree. But that's also a constraint. It can never become a banana tree. And so your avatar is really a constraint imposed by nature itself, deliberately, to foster an experience, to facilitate an experience, for the purpose of wealth generation. You live so that you can generate and create wealth for yourself and for the environment that contains you. That's the most fundamental purpose of all forms of life, is wealth. And the interdependencies between each other form of life, the fact that every new form of life evolves and adapts to meet the unmet need of some other form of life that already exists, is what enables that perpetual evolution to continually take place. The imperfect state of one form of life, having a need met, having a constraint that's preventing it from expanding, having a constraint met by the evolution of another form of life to meet that unmet need. This is what makes it perpetual and eternal. And this is truly the purpose of your life. You were born with unique DNA to meet the unmet need of something else within the environment. And it's the desire of the collective that you are a part of, pulsing that desire out, that's altering the DNA of your environment. It's your perception is altering your DNA, and therefore when a new baby is born and it adopts that DNA is within that human being, holds the destiny of a being that can evolve to meet the unmet need of some other form of life contained by the system. This is how it all works. And so if you zoom out and take on the perspective of the system as a whole, if you were to personify the consciousness of the universe, let's say, what you would be doing is you realize that you're containing all of these forms of life. You see them all as assets. And if your genius is that if your genius is eternal life, because you're the universe, you're perpetually evolving and expanding and self-regulating, it's autonomous, then what you're doing is you're looking at every individual component as an asset and the ultimate goal is for each individual asset that you contain to appreciate. And everything that's not appreciating, everything that's depreciating, you want to reconstitute that into something that can appreciate. And this is the nature of reality. And to become truly aligned with the genius of the universe is to become aligned with wealth generation And to generate wealth, your devotion should be to your uniqueness. What is your uniqueness? What is that gift, and how can you share it? You know, for it to appreciate, for your gifts to be appreciated, they have to be seen first and foremost by you, recognized, and then shared with other people. And the unmet need of those people has to be met by your uniqueness. That's how you generate wealth. Your uniqueness is enabling some other form of life to transcend a constraint and therefore evolve and become more. So we're a long way from this currently. But, it's a mindset shift. If you can bring yourself into alignment with the purpose of this entire universe, with its genius and what it's seeking to do, is to appreciate all of its assets. If you can bring yourself into alignment with that and appreciate all of your assets and everything that you possess that you're the custodian of, you can view that as an asset and utilize that to appreciate that asset. Bond it to other assets that can form businesses and organizations or machines or creations that can meet the unmet need of some other form of life, that can dissolve a constraint within some other form of life or organization or whatever it may be. Then you're part of a wealth generating mechanism and machine. And if you're not generating wealth, or if you're not part of a structure or an organization that is generating wealth, then you're depreciating. So I'll leave it there. Probably wasn't what you expected, but eternal life, it's not a magical state where you reach immortality. It's a state of understanding that eternal life already exists, and that the essential components to eternal life is the illusion of a beginning and an end. But in reality, in truth, it's not a beginning and an end. It's reconstitution of building blocks that are already there. But we're just using those building blocks to create something different, using the same building blocks. So how can we? How can we collaborate together to bond our uniqueness to reconstitute what's already in front of us right now, to dissolve the constraints of some other form of life, to meet the unmet needs of something or someone else within the system that we're a part of. And not only will we find, not only do we put ourselves into a state of wealth generation, but we create a sense of total fulfillment. Because if you look at the word fulfillment, fulfill, it means to fill something up until it's full. And when your cup is full, that means, and it's overflowing, it means you're generating wealth. It means you're generating a surplus of what you need, and everything that's flowing over the top can then be utilized to spawn some other form of life, to create something new, to enable something else to live that would not be able to live otherwise, because everything new that's created, whether it's a human being or a business, it needs to receive a surplus from elsewhere. And so your own fulfillment is the most powerful thing you can achieve for everyone else, because you're generating a surplus that creates new life, that can dissolve constraints for someone else. This is the purpose of wealth, and there is no shame in being wealthy. The wealthier you are, the more constraints are being negated for other people. So become as wealthy as you can, as long as you share that wealth. Because the truth is, if you generate wealth and you try and hold on to it, and store it so that it's not being utilized, elsewhere, then the universe is already trying to take it away from you somehow. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. This has been the nature of eternal life. Cheers for now.